apparently that is our new intro for Are We Over Wrestling podcast.
We over.
Welcome back to the AWO podcast, and today we're going to be talking about Chris Jericho's interview with Steve Austin on the Broken Skull sessions that happened the first night of WrestleMania. It was a 2-hour interview, and there was tons of stuff that came out of that interview that was very interesting. So, Jimmy, what did you think when you heard that Jericho was going to be on the Broken Skull Session podcast?
I thought it was a prank. I thought someone had doctored a picture until I saw the official release from the WWE.com, and to say that, are there any surprises left in wrestling? The answer is yes. Total shock, just absolute shock.
Chef, what was your reaction?
My reaction was, it's all a work.
I knew that.
It's all a work. It's all a work. There you go. No, I mean, I was shocked. I was like, wow, Vince is really lightening up in his old age, and obviously Tony Khan's just cool enough to let it happen, and the powers that be all came together, and you got a future Hall of Famer that's obviously going to be allowed to be in the Hall of Fame someday, no matter where he's at.
I mean, you would like to think this happened because of Vince's respect of Jericho.
Right.
Like, you would like to think that's part of it. CM Punk came out, and the respect of Stone Cold. CM Punk came out and said that Vince letting them do this means he doesn't even consider AEW to be anything, even a blimp on the radar. AEW probably got more press out of that one podcast than they have from anything. Like, yeah, it had to have helped them. You know what I mean? Like, it had to. The night after WrestleMania 1, Jericho talking all about how amazing AEW. I mean, and then you saw the ratings. So maybe it does all work. Maybe they're all in cahoots.
Well, I think maybe, and I don't know, because we always talk about how
Kim's talking again. I'm yawning.
But maybe it's the opposite, and Vince thought, hey, maybe we can get some of the AEW fans over to WWE if we let this happen and see what happens with that. Because I don't know, when Jericho came on, that was the first thing they talked about was, how did this come to be? And
I thought it was cool that they went right into AEW first thing. Like, they didn't even go around it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just like, hey, this is how we came here. Bam, you're in AEW. Like, I thought they would kind of snowball around it or something, like they do when they talk like, I used to be in TNA or something, but they didn't hide from it. I was impressed.
Well, what they said was that it came from a discussion, obviously Chris Jericho and Steve Austin still talk, and they talked about, that they stay in touch, and Chris Jericho had reached out to him one early morning after drinking, and
I think it was after the Undertaker interview.
Yes, after the Undertaker's interview on the Broken Skull sessions, and said, hey, great interview. And basically, people have said, oh, well, he reached out because he was trying to take advantage of that opportunity. Well, maybe he was, but
I mean, who cares? Who cares why it happened? I mean,
right.
It still and also Vince doesn't do anything without money involved. And so you had to think that with the move to Peacock, that with WrestleMania being the very first thing, they had to have something huge to get people even more into the network. And this was, from a wrestling standpoint, this was perfect.
This was huge.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Well, when they did get into talking about AEW, Jericho said that he felt that at the beginning, AEW was kind of all on his shoulders. when everything started. So
Like Atlas.
Jimmy, do you think that's true? Was everything?
I thought you were
on
doing
Chris
Kane.
Jericho?
I thought you were doing Kane.
I was holding up the weight of the world with my shoulder.
I agree. I would say him and Cody, because you really think those were the only two that have experience with live television. But yeah, Jericho is that, you're starting a new NBA franchise and you need some sort of star player, whether they're past the prime or not, to sell tickets and get them noticed. Jericho was that, as much as you hate to hear how it ended in the WWE or whatever, but yeah, you have to agree. It was all on his shoulders.
There's a lot of guys in the back that have experience, but they weren't going to be wrestling talent. A lot of the people they have, running the trucks and the training and stuff, people like Billy Gunn and you got Arn Anderson and all. I mean, like they're all teachers and coaches and stuff, and they've got TV experience too, but they didn't have, the person they had that was going to come out there and work was Jericho. He was the guy. So yeah, yes. It was it sounded cocky of him to say it, but that's him.
A lot of the stuff he said kind of cocky, unless you actually know his history of work,
Right.
But he didn't have, if Moxley would have been available right from the start, that would have been different. But it really was him. It was like Nitro was all on Hogan's shoulders, even though he had Flair at that time. They built everything around Hogan when they started and Sting. But yeah, they didn't even have a Flair or Sting. They had a Cody. Cody is good, but he's not on Jericho's level.
Right.
Yeah, and
he's got all the connections.
They mentioned, that a lot of the guys that were there from the start are great wrestlers, but they didn't have the same kind of name recognition that Jericho obviously had. They put the title on him right away for a reason, because they were trying to attract people to AEW. And so, I guess if you're going to put it on someone, Jericho's
lost it. And then he lost it and left it in a car. Remember that?
Well, but Jericho is a pretty good person to put it on, I guess.
He's one of the top 5 of all time. He's not number 1, but he's one of the top 5 of all time. But he mentioned, TV contract, you needed money, and then you needed guys to build around it. And he felt he had Omega, Cody, the Bucks, him, and Hangman Page, and that was 6 guys they could build around.
That's one guy they can build around.
Yeah,
maybe 2. But, as far as
but really, in the States, everyone. I would say Jericho's about as close to a household name as you would get in the wrestling world. He's not. I don't think he's Cena. I don't think he's Taker. I don't think he's even Randy Orton as far as name brand recognition and like household names, people who don't watch wrestling. But he felt like you had people who could wrestle and hold a show, and we're not talking AEW right now, but I've never seen Hangman really do anything. Is he hurt? We're not talking AEW.
He's still on there, but we'll talk about him at
maybe they have too many factions.
Well, so the reason that Jericho left WrestleMania, left WWE, was due to a WrestleMania issue. And this was a time, so back in 2015, was a time where Def Chef and I were going to a lot of the, live shows. We went to like 3 live shows in a very short period of time.
SmackDowns,
And it happened to be around the same time that the story was happening with Jericho and Kevin Owens
and John Moxley
with the list and the Festival of Friendship and everything. And he talked about how it was one of the biggest storylines, if not the biggest storyline in 2015. And he and Owens were told at one time that they were going to be the main event at WrestleMania.
One of the main events. He cleared it up at the end.
Okay.
One of the main
main events at WrestleMania. As things got closer, the story, things changed and it ended up being a different main event. But
oh yeah, Goldberg Lesnar.
yeah. But the thing he was most upset about was that it went from being a main event storyline to second on the
number
card.
2 slot.
And he was very upset that he felt like that was going to be his, WWE was making a statement that that's where they thought he belonged. And I've heard him talk about that more than just on this podcast. And he was very upset by that whole everything that happened. So do you think that he was justified for being upset and, then thus leaving WWE because of that, Jimmy?
I have to say that whole situation made the list. It was, I'm not saying, it may not be the best storyline of that year, but it was the best storyline and buildup of any match going into Mania. That was the year you had AJ against Shane, which was terrible.
Yeah.
It was, the people were so invested in that storyline. They've gotten so much mileage out of those two. Great chemistry. Look at the second match this year, WrestleMania, was that women's tornado match or whatever they had, that tag team match. Jericho and Owens should never
second matches.
Right. I understand Goldberg and Lesnar from a name value is going to put more butts in the seat, but from a wrestler's point of view, everybody I know in the world would rather see Jericho and Owens for the Universal title in the main event of WrestleMania than Goldberg and Lesnar, which ended up being a nothing match. So yeah, he had every right to be upset. He had earned more than the second spot. I think they were treating him kind of like, people who go in cycles like Cesaro or Shinsuke or people like that who like, we're going to push you, then we're not. We're going to push you. And Jericho should always just be pushed. Like he always just should be pushed. Unless he says, like Kane did with Daniel Bryan, I'll team up with this guy and give him some clout, in a tag team, which Kane did. You realize Daniel Bryan was not Daniel Bryan when Hell No was going on. Like Kane did that for him, you know what I mean? And Jericho should always be at the top of the show, always in consideration for the title, unless he says I will do this. And so I agree. Def Chef.
Yeah. Oh, that went on a long around.
Hey, eventually, if I went long enough, I would turn that to Drew Gulak.
You would.
I would turn that to how Drew Gulak.
You just did. There you go.
I did, yeah.
I think he was totally justified in being upset about things. There was some great stuff going on in that short era. We got to see, Dean Ambrose, Jon Moxley. We were there live when he pulled the coat off of Jericho, the lit up coat, and slashed it all up. We watched that stuff. There was so much great things he was still involved in that time. And to be told, hey, you're going to go on second. It's like, wouldn't you rather at least be first?
That's
the night and just blow it up. And he said that too.
Give us first. Give us first.
Yeah, I remember.
Last, I never want to be in the middle unless it's headlining DJ and the best night, but that's.
I remember that WrestleMania, and I remember like being excited about that match because of the storyline, and then thinking, how did this end up being? Being second is really a horrible spot. It's like, it's almost, but not quite like being on the pre-show. Like
I've seen some awesome pre-shows too.
Being first is something where it's like you're kicking off WrestleMania. You had Orton and The Fiend kicking off WrestleMania. You know what I mean? It is a prominent spot. It's not like back in the day when like the first match ever was like Tito Santana against somebody, the very first WrestleMania. And by the way, little tribute fact, guys, the first person ever to cut a promo in WrestleMania history was Tito Santana. So there you go. But no, I agree. If the answer is, was he justified? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things that was very prominent on this as well was the fact that Jericho has kept a list, kept track of every single match that he has ever been in, including, you know, the details about who he wrestled, where it was, how much he got paid, details of the match, you know, everything. And he turned that into a book recently.
No, it's not out yet. It's not out yet.
Well, yeah, but it's coming out. It'll be out soon. And
yeah, because the first thing I did immediately was
try to buy
for
it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Look for the book. Like, where's it at? Yeah.
I went to buy it, right? You can't even pre-order it right now. Like, I went immediately.
And Steve Austin did talk about just how exceptional it was that he did that, because he, you know, the thing that hit me about this podcast too is that Jericho really did seem to have a plan for his career. He thought things through, he executed it, and keeping this list was kind of one of those signs of, you know, him keeping track of where he's been and where he's going.
Well, and the cool thing, it's like he always had a plan. Like, he seemed like, you know, maybe if I show up at this indie show, somebody will see me. You know, he always. Yeah. Like, I love that part about how he was always thinking way far ahead.
Yeah. And Steve Austin gave him props for that and just said that, you know, nobody else has that kind of record of their history. And Jericho had said that
maybe Jim Cornette.
He did, and knowing that, like, when he would ask people about, you know, matches from their history and they couldn't remember them or know them or whatever, he didn't want to be like that. And so he started putting the list together. And I would totally buy that book. And I'd love to see it, especially after watching this podcast. And they really went through a lengthy history of his career, from, you know, the very beginning, and him starting out in Canada, where he was from, and how he got to where he is today. And that is, you know, that in itself is a very interesting story. But
yeah, because he basically had to send off a check in the mail. Like, people and kids nowadays don't even know what the mail is or what checks are.
Right.
You know, and he had to just basically wait 6 weeks for someone to say, you know, hey, we got your check coming this time, you know what I mean? Versus signing up on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love, that's the best part about these podcasts with Stone Cold, is he goes through, like, you know,
everything.
Yeah. And Jericho made the most of every opportunity he had. Like, everywhere he went to Mexico with the goal, I can work with Ultimo Dragon, and he could take me to Japan. If I get to Japan, I can work with this Kato guy. You know what I mean? Just all this stuff. And, you know,
all thought out step by step.
Yeah. If I keep calling Paul Heyman, eventually I'll get to ECW and someone will see me in the States. You know, but the whole goal was to work for Vince.
Yeah.
Always.
Yep. It always was. And he even said that he didn't really see himself after he had been at not at AEW, at WWE. He didn't really see himself going anywhere else. And yet, you know, things kind of changed as we kind of talked about with the breakdown. He also talked about while he was with WCW, he went and met with Vince McMahon. And I thought this was like just a really funny story, because he talked about going there. When he got there, he wasn't really sure what he was, you know, walking into. It ended up being a booking meeting for Raw, and he sat down at the table, like was offered like some lunch and some brownies.
And man can't have 2 brownies.
Yeah, didn't know if he should eat 2 brownies, and then Vince had 2, so he went ahead and had 2, and then
they sit you right by Brent. Well, you realize back in that day, it's like, you know, Vince is like, who can I trust? You know, everyone was jumping ship, and, you know, who could he trust that will? And, you know, Jericho proves, you know.
Yeah. But I loved that, you know, he left that meeting. He said he talked to his fiance, who now is his wife, and she said, "How did the meeting go?" And he was like, "I have no idea." Like, he didn't know what happened, and he didn't know why that all happened until years later when
Yeah.
he asked Vince about it, and Vince told him, "I needed to see if I could trust you." So it was, I thought that was a really fun story, and just a little kind of behind the scenes of stuff.
Yeah.
So when Jericho came to WWE, we, he had what Steve Austin called one of the best debuts of all time.
I mean, it's.
I think I watched it. I honestly believe I watched it live.
I saw it live when it happened, and I mean, I've watched it so many times to count, and it is up there with, the only other feeling I had at the time. Okay, so Jericho's debut when Shawn Michaels retired for the first time and Triple H took over DX, and then he brought out X-Pac. That was a huge pop. But really, all the way, if you fast forward a ton to when AJ showed up at the Rumble, like, that's the only thing really compare on that level of
when the Hardys came back a few years back. Pop was huge.
Yeah,
that was the most full WrestleMania I think there's ever been, too. Like, the most people at it. So I mean, that pop was immense. I heard that music and I about jumped off the couch.
You broke the couch.
Oh yeah, I broke the couch. Yeah, there's a broke the couch moment right there.
In case you're wondering, people, when I was in college, I marked out so much the Stone Cold one night shooting arrows at fake deer with Owen Hart's picture on it that I laughed so hard I was jumping them down. I broke our couch. So that way, if someone says I broke the couch, that means they went so crazy that they literally broke the furniture.
Yeah,
so.
I broke the furniture when the Hardys came back, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, there's always great pops that stick up in your head, but that's a whole nother episode.
Well, yeah. I love how
I like it. We just got a new one right there.
I love how Jericho, everything that he has done, he wanted to be a rock star and a wrestler. He said that, and everything that
he wanted to be Gene Simmons. He wanted to be Gene Simmons and Hulk Hogan or whatever, or Ricky the Dragon or Macho Man.
And he talked about when he did his debut and his back was turned to the audience with his arms out, and he just stood there for I don't know how long, but a while, and everybody was going crazy. That was an homage to Michael Jackson. He had seen him live, and he stood there for like over 5 minutes with that pose, and he just said that's how it needed to happen. Like, I knew that.
Well, and you could totally see Michael Jackson just doing that, everyone going crazy.
Yeah. So that was neat too. I loved hearing him talk about how the music was kind of interwoven in everything he did in wrestling as well, and he just kind of patterned himself in different characters that he was after different rock stars. So and obviously he is Def Chef and I talk about this all the time. He's such a rock star. Like, he is a rock star when he's in the ring all the time. He is, taking that moment and just, like he talked about taking advantage of every moment. He's still doing it. He's taking advantage of every moment, and every word that comes out of his mouth is like, people hang on it, and it becomes t-shirts, and it becomes bottles of champagne. That's
well, and he specifically
a little bit of the bubbly
and he specifically showed when he did the 100 or 1004 moves. I saw that night live, and that was, I mean, in my opinion,
deep arm drag.
Yeah, that's the first time
deep arm drag.
Jericho like stuck out in my mind was that moment. Like, he really did make the best chance of every little second he got. And you believe like he was still naming off stuff in their commercial break, and just to find out that he was just ripping on Chicago cities. What the greatest thing ever.
Talking about getting
building heat like you would not believe. if anybody can get cheap heat, it's Jericho.
Oh,
Like,
no,
he can walk into
him and the Miz.
oh yeah,
Him and the Miz.
Yeah.
just put them two in a room, and all they gotta do is call everybody stupid idiots and this and that. And it's like,
Well,
yeah.
so Jericho gave a lot of credit to The Rock for helping him out with his debut in WWE. And he said not too many people knew about that debut, but Rock was
him,
one
Rock
of
and
them
Russo.
because
Yeah.
he was interrupting a promo by The Rock, and he talked about how cool The Rock was, and they practiced it, and he gave him kind of some feedback, and that he let him, Rock was, one of the top, if not the top guy at the time,
the most overest,
and let Jericho come and interrupt him, during a promo. And he said, he just gave all the props to him for letting him do that and really letting, that work itself, between the two of them, and that he couldn't have
and it
probably had the same thing without him.
I think that's just missing on wrestling nowadays. Just, you don't have that, veterans letting, younger people get that clout or that shine anymore. Like The Rock, if that could have been anybody really, but the fact that it was Rock or Austin or Taker at that time, the big three, Foley wasn't even that big at that time. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's phenomenal for The Rock to do that. And you never know if Vince asked him or if Vince just told him, you know what I mean? He's not Dwayne Johnson at the time. He's just The Rock, he's still an employee. So, yeah, but it doesn't work with anyone except for an Austin or Taker or Jericho. But the fact that, The Rock was so generous, it reminds me of something I want to talk about later this week that I saw on Raw. But anyway,
this kind of touches on something that I really took from this interview, was how he said that the way AEW's having older talent work with younger talent to keep them both relevant instead of just new guys with new guys and old guys with old guys. I think that's definitely plays back to that a lot. That's how it should be done. These guys should help build new guys up on their way out, and really that's how these guys stay a family and keep the business of wrestling going, is they gotta put it on the next guy's shoulders and pass off into the wind like a Jedi fading away or something.
Well, Jericho did have a time of burnout, and he talked about that on this podcast too, when in 2005 he just felt like he just didn't want to wrestle anymore, and so he left WWE and spent some time doing some acting and
taking lessons.
Yep.
Taking lessons. Yeah.
And doing that and not knowing, if he was going to be going back to wrestling at all. He said he didn't watch wrestling for a long time during that time until he heard that John Cena and Shawn Michaels were going to be a main event on WrestleMania. And he had worked with both of them, had a lot of respect for both of them. And so he watched that match, and he said he remembered that it made him feel jealous, and that's what led to his return back to wrestling. So it blows my mind to think that, he could have left and not come back.
Right.
So Def Chef, what did you think about that story?
I find it interesting that he did improv comedy in that time. Like that probably helped him with so much of what he's become now. Just to be able to just, whatever you say, you just go with it and you stick with it and you keep that confidence on your face, and you don't act like, don't just say that. You just got to go with it. That's what improv taught him. And I think that's really worked out for what he's become. It's helped him just always have the confidence to just keep getting over.
Jimmy?
The Phenom.
Are you still with us?
Are you frozen? Or are you holding your breath?
I just wanted to see if you'd fall for it.
No, you did. You were like straight. It was good. It was good.
I was like, did you die? Are you okay?
When you do something for so long and you burn out, and then you get that itch again. Wrestling's one of the few things you can keep coming back and back to. It's not like you quit the NBA, and then 4 years later or whatever it was, 9 years later, he wants to come back. Like you wrestling's one of that things can work. Look at Goldberg, it's a poor example, but yeah, I agree. So
okay, well, let's kind of wrap this up with a couple of questions. So one of the things that I wanted to get from you guys was what do you think was the best moment of this podcast for you? I'll start out just by saying that when he talked about taking advantage of every moment, like he said, whether he, had 1 minute or 5 minutes or 20 minutes, he knew what he was going to do with it. And he made sure that people would remember him with what he did with that time. And I felt like you can see that throughout his career, even now, and what he's doing. And I think that that's something that really people can apply to, like anybody can apply that to their life. You've got to take advantage of the opportunities that you have, make the most of it, be memorable. And to me, that's what I took away from it. And I thought, yeah, that's definitely Jericho. And to hear that he kind of made that his goal throughout his career didn't surprise me at all. It was evident, but it was something that I was like, that's so cool that, he did that and really made himself who he was.
And I agree. Like, I hope Humberto Contreras or whatever his name is was listening to that after he had like 5 seconds to get beat down by Sheamus last night. Make the best of everything you're given. I liked how he talked about every time he came back, he needed to have a totally different look. He needed to have a different suit, a different haircut, a different thing. I like that. The best part of the interview, though, is how human they are when they're not in the ring. How he won the Universal Undisputed Championship, and then he couldn't even get a pizza. He gets locked out of his room.
Oh my God!
And like, no matter what you talk about, they're still humans. And like,
Regis something the third.
Something's gonna happen.
He remembers the guy's name.
Yeah, I love that story because it shows that. I mean, he just beat Stone Cold and The Rock in the same night and ate a cold pizza that fell on the floor. So there you go.
Def Chef, what was your most memorable thing from this podcast?
Oh, God, there's so much. This is stupid, but watching Stone Cold Steve Austin throw back shots of Blanton's whiskey like it was cheap garbage. I'm just like, oh my God, that's a $80 bottle and you're acting like it's Jack Daniels. I thought that was hilarious. But I really like I'd mentioned before, how he talked about working with younger guys and always trying to build them up. I think I really see that as kind of his legacy, is he's going to be one of those people that was always there to help build new stars and did a great job at doing it. Whether he was face or heel, it didn't matter. He knows how to take somebody else and bring them into the spotlight, get them noticed, and make their talent shine. And you need more people like him to do that in the industry, and it would all be better.
Okay, so I want to just wrap everything up with us talking briefly about our favorite Jericho moments from his career. And I have to say that, knowing that I've only been watching wrestling for about the past 11 years or so, like full time, I have to say that I really feel like Jericho is at his prime right now at AEW and what he is doing there. And it's no, listen, it's good and it's bad in ways, but like, he's the worst at like sometimes selling things. Like he's like seconds away from cracking up sometimes when he's doing things. But to me, that makes it almost even funnier, because it's like watching Saturday Night Live, and when people break character, it makes it funnier. And so like, you can tell sometimes that he is like totally just off the cuff coming up with some of the best zingers and lines and stuff. And some of the things he says, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he just said that. And so I love that about him. I love that you never know what's going to really come out of his mouth. And, you know, I think when he did the whole little bit of the bubbly thing, I believe that was just totally off the cuff, and it became this huge thing. Now, you know, he's calling, you know, the pinnacle the pineapple, and they're like, you know, correcting him. And, I mean, it's funny, and I love comedy. I love, you know, like I said, that you never know what's going to happen. So for me, that's one of the best things about AEW is watching him and what he's going to come up with. So, Jimmy, I can see you totally disagree with me. So let's talk about your favorite part of Jericho.
I mean, I guess we never know what's going to come out of Kim's mouth either. Jericho's in his prime. Whatever. He might be.
I'm not talking about wrestling. I'm talking about.
He might be having a lot of fun and enjoying himself and having a great end of his career. But I mean, there really is nothing to say outside of the debut of when he came out against The Rock. I mean, that I mean, I hate to say it, but like that'll probably be the top point of his career. Not that he has an amazing career. I think also, of course, winning the undisputed heavyweight championship because no one thought he would. Like no one saw that coming, and I thought it was great. And one thing people forget, and he only talked about this for a short second, but the stuff that he did with Stephanie McMahon was classic. Those two had so much fun and so much chemistry together that people forget how well they worked together and the promos and skits and everything they did. So I'll throw that out there too. Even though I don't like Stephanie, I'll give her some clout.
Chef.
Gosh. I'm still just dying over Mitch the Potted Plant. Like, like the potted plant that we were there for, that he literally stole from the place we were at. That's just great. I mean, I thought it was hilarious. The Mimosa Mayhem match with Orange Cassidy. I mean, it was a bad match, but just the fact that you got this guy whose whole thing is orange juice and him and his bubbly, and he turned it into a stupid match. I mean, like, I don't know.
I really thought the list was great too. I like you, Jimmy, you did it earlier with the click of the pen. And
oh man, I got a funny story to tell. So my daughter, when she was, I guess I was 2 or 3, she would go around the house saying, "You just made the list," and like she would just quote it all the time. And so she said it to her grandparents, my in-laws, and they kind of look at me like her grandpa did something, and she would, "You just made the list." And then trying to explain to someone the concept of what the list is just sounds ludicrously stupid to anyone that doesn't watch wrestling. Right. Like when I'm explaining it to the grandparents, you sound like the dumbest person on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
And so why is your daughter saying it? I mean, it made no sense. So that's a great story.
That was really funny. I remember when the Festival of Friendship was on, I remember watching that, and I knew that there was going to be a turn coming because you just knew that was happening.
Had to.
But at the same time, when Owens gave him the gift and he opened it up and he was like, "Oh, it's a list, you know," and on the back it says Owens list, and he turns it over. I just remember in my head just like, oh no, I didn't want that to end. It was so good, you know. And so
kick to the head. Boom.
So yeah, so when that happened, I felt like, it was like a mark out moment for me of like, I was there like just wanting the Festival of Friendship to just be all love and kumbaya and everything that they promised it was going to be. And
well, and then there was one time when he came back again and he brought out the sparkly jacket, but then he refused to talk. You know, he came back one time, refused to talk for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. He just ran out and ran around the crowd. Another moment was really good was he came out the Rumble one year at number 2, and no one saw it coming. And he went like, he was a marathon man for that match. Not only did he came out as a shock, but he went like from number 2 all the way to like 30 that year. And I always loved the fact that when Jericho came back, he came back full time. Like he went on the house shows. Like he wasn't one of those come back just to be on TV.
Yeah.
Right. He came back and actually went like 100% back to the house shows and traveling the road. And I always liked that too. And everything. So that's what I would say. I wouldn't say he's in his prime.
Well, we can have difference of opinion, and I know you don't think that he's the greatest of all time.
Nope.
Feel like,
is he on the Mount Squashmore of wrestling though?
Nope, not on the Mount Rushmore either.
I feel like he is, but
nope.
I think
that's
so.
Not. He is not on the Mount Rushmore.
But we'll have this debate on another episode, so stay tuned for that. I want to thank everybody who's watching. If you're new to our podcast, thank you for watching.
Do it, Corey.
To subscribe. And we really need your help in getting us over. So please share out this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to it and hit the bell so that you know when our new episodes are coming out. We will have new episodes coming this next week. We're working on 2 a week at least, maybe 3, and so keep on watching and helping us get over. And
in my mind, we're way over.
Oh well, okay.
We're so over, we're back under again.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Come all the way around. Yeah.
So for the Phenom Jimmy and the Deaf Chef, I am Kim Sparkles, and we will see you next time.